Our next speaker is Sarah Wolfensohn from the University of Surrey and also from the DEFRA Animal Welfare Committee. And she's going to present Understand and Improve Welfare by using the Animal Welfare Assessment Grid. So, Sarah?
Right, I need to share.
Yes, please,
Screen.
if you can share your screen. There it is.
Is that working? Yeah, does
yes.
that work? Yep, great.
Yes.
Okay, and you can hear me, yes?
And we can hear you fine.
Great, okay, off we go. So thank you very much for letting me come to talk to you about, I hope, understanding and improving welfare by using the Animal Welfare Assessment Grid. So welfare, as we talked about, the 5 domains, the Animal Welfare Assessment Grid has 4 parameters which reflect those 5 domains. So the physical parameter looks at nutrition and health, psychological, behavioral and mental state, the environment is there, and procedural looks at the impact of anything we do to an animal, whether it's a management procedure, a veterinary procedure, transport, anything like that, which of course can impact on all of the 5 domains. But where the AWAG is different is that it looks at the duration of what we're doing. So much welfare assessment looks at an animal at single moments in time. So if you're a vet, you look at it now and you say, oh, bring it back next week, next month, next year. If you're doing welfare inspections of farms, they might only be done every 3 years, and then you go away again. And then you come back 3 years later, and we want to look at it across its lifetime. We want to look at the animal's quality of life, not just single moments in time. So the assessment of animal welfare, the 5 domains, of course, includes physical and mental states and positive and negative welfare. But at the moment, there's no single agreed methodology for doing it. And basic welfare assessment often doesn't cover the 5 domains. They leave out behavior and mental state sometimes and simply look at the animal's physical condition. That dominates the assessment. Whatever method we use, we need to tailor it for the species, the type of animal use, because there's no one size fits all, and it has to be easy to use. Measurements must be made at the animal level, not simply looking at the provision of resources. Oh, we gave it all that, well, it didn't use it. So, we need to take that into account. And moving forward, we need to think particularly about assessing the impacts of gene editing, which is increasing so much now with farm animals. We're doing gene editing, and that will have an impact on health, growth, and behavior. And we need to evaluate that with the impact of the farming environment, not simply look at the impact of a research environment, which is very different to a farming environment. And then we need to continue that assessment across the animal's lifetime, because we need to look at any potentially delayed effects of gene editing. We need to look at it from neonate through to adult. And then we need to think about what is the unacceptable welfare level from all these husbandry, breeding, and all these different procedures that we're doing. We need to define what information should be reported and for how long. What about post-market monitoring and reporting systems? They need to be established, and they need to be across different areas as well, because of course a lot of this food is going to be imported and moved around. And then what is the likelihood of expression of recessive genes and their effects 2 to 3 generations down the line? When something mutates, when something else comes along, we're protecting it from some disease by having this genetic editing, but then maybe the virus mutates and it becomes more susceptible to something. We need to look at that. And to do these things, we can use the Animal Welfare Assessment Grid. There's the website there. So the Welfare Assessment Grid has these 4 axes: physical, environment, psychological, and procedural events. And we look at various factors, which I'll talk about in a moment. We give each factor a score. 1 is normal, 10 is grossly abnormal. So the bigger the score, the worse the animal's welfare. And the software plots looks at the factors, plots the score for each of these 4 axes, and then assesses the area of this grid, giving us the cumulative welfare assessment score for that moment in time. So it plots these grids across time. And when you put in the data, you put it in, this is a totally made up example here, because we've never had another one score 10 on every single factor. But these are the factors we're scoring for this animal. This was a dog. Looking at the factors, if you don't score something, you just click not applicable, so it doesn't take that score into account. The scores are color coded, so 10 is there's a real problem here, it's red, do something about it. 1 is good, it's green. And then you can put in bits of information. So down here you can see we can put in information, put lots of notes in. So if you did have something with bad welfare, you can say, the ground flooded, something happened, whatever, and you can put in the detail and drill down to what's causing the problem. And then it gives you the scores for each of the 4 axes and the cumulative welfare assessment score, which it then plots. This is a real example. This plots onto a graph to show you the maximum you can have is 200, which I've never seen with everything, but 45 here, this animal has a bit of a welfare problem, but it responds to the treatment that's been given to it, or the changes in management that's happened. And this grey shaded area are what is generally considered, with all the pilot studies we've done and the validation studies we've done, generally considered to be within okay limits, because of course you can't have a welfare score of 1 on everything all the time, because life's a bitch and then you die. You can't have total freedom from thirst and hunger, because if you do, you wouldn't eat, you wouldn't drink. So you have to have pain to go, ow, that hurts, don't touch it, it's hot. So you have to have a little bit of impact, but this is an acceptable normal level of life, and then you can see where to drill down and make a difference. Because of course the quality of the animal that we're dealing with, their perception of welfare isn't affected by the reason for its life or the cause of its suffering. They don't sign consent forms for what we're doing. So we have to ask, is it acceptable for animals to suffer in the name of scientific progress in research, because of owner ignorance, brachycephalic dogs, to produce cheap food, or the farm animals for entertainment, racehorses, greyhounds, and so on? And if so, how much and for how long? And we need, in order to assess that, that's the function of ethical review processes, regulatory bodies, and the success in those depends on the culture where you're working, the resources the regulatory authority has, society's values, and economics. Money, money, money drives all of it. So whatever the animals use, is the animal fit for purpose, and is that total level of suffering justified by the benefits that we or other animals or society is getting from whatever it is we're doing? So we need an objective measurement to decide if reduced quality of life is justified and what sort of treatment or husbandry changes are appropriate, and also to decide when to carry out euthanasia. And there's a link there to a podcast that I've done about using it for euthanasia. So welfare in veterinary practice, it's more than just health and disease, which is what vets tend to focus on all the time. Of course, most farming systems restrict normal behavior, and high productivity, like these chickens here, doesn't necessarily mean good welfare. And over the years, the breeding strategies and husbandry systems aim to maximize productivity, but have had some adverse welfare outcomes over the generations. So far with the AWAG, we've defined the factors and the scores for those factors. The scores are all defined so that we've reduced inter-observer variability relevant to the particular species and the type of use that we're looking at, because there's no one size fits all. The website development is Ruben Digital, who do all the computer work for us. We have a dog site, which was funded by Agria. My PhD student just finished her PhD working on that. We do a lot of work with zoos. Marwell Zoo is the lead zoo on that, that's been dealing with that. With laboratory primates, the UK Health Security Agency, we used the AWAG system to look at the welfare, particularly the primates used for the COVID vaccine development, which is just about to be published, that work. And laboratory rodents, we've done work with that. The Greyhound Board for Great Britain use it as part of their welfare strategy. We've done some work with retired racehorses, and we're now moving into cattle and pigs in the farming situation, because we want to link with telemetric monitoring as precision livestock farming technologies are developed. Now, the problem is collection of welfare data requires time and effort. Farmers are busy. We've heard already today how much they have too much to do, and they're being driven by the retailers. But the use of AI is developing. We have all these bits of technology. We can look at where animals are, where they're going, what they're doing. And we have new management and information technologies, and their increasing use has huge potential to improve aspects of welfare monitoring, and then doing something to take action. But I must point out that by reducing the frequency of contact between animals and stock persons, which AI might lead to, this may lead to a reduction in attention to some other areas of welfare. We need to bear that in mind. It's not necessarily going to answer everything, but it does have huge potential if used well. The World Health Organization advocates that One Health, this integrated approach to sustainably balance and optimize health of people, animals, and the ecosystem, which are linked, and farmed animal welfare and health is a factor in the risk of emerging zoonotic diseases. The outbreak of bird flu, for example, which has now moved to wildlife, to dairy cattle, to humans, is a good example. We need better farming practices to protect all the species, not just for animal welfare, but for everything. And it's integral to sustainable agriculture and is a key differentiator. and is at the heart of regenerative solutions. We need to think about animal welfare. But then we need to think about the legislation and enforcement. People are concerned with animal welfare. If you ask them, they really want good welfare. But once they go into a shop, acting as a consumer, they just focus on cost of what's on offer. What shall I buy today? Consumers need labeling systems that give them meaning information. And the retailers have the power. They set the standards for production, not the farmers. They operate in international supply chains and they have control. And their incentive is maximize market share and profits. Money, money, money. That drives it. We need policy decisions for the future of food and farming systems informed by citizen engagement and public debate. We've been talking about education already today, and we need to think about that. The legislation must be effective all the way from farm to slaughter to protect human and animal health. So we need enforcement of that legislation. We need to share data and intelligence. We need to make sure those who are responsible for those controls are well trained, and we're not depending on the same people who look at taxis and restaurants and that sort of legislation. So the AWAG is a tool that reflects those 5 domains of welfare, quantifies it using a temporal approach, and will drill down to those separate components so you can really focus on the factors that are causing the problem. So then you can have improvements targeting at the specific elements. It will then demonstrate to regulators, customers, welfare groups that you're taking a proactive approach to welfare. It encourages teamwork and communication on welfare. We found that staff get very involved and want to engage with it all, and then they'll take action to improve or prevent deterioration of the animal's welfare. It will generate big data to inform policymakers and ensure better animal welfare and public perception, giving the animals a good life rather than just a life worth living or a poor life. So have influence, take action and make a difference. We've already discussed the 5 societal challenges to food and farming systems. Think about how policy, legislation, economics, all these things can impact on the welfare of animals. We want discussion on what we must do to improve welfare with the increasing use of technology which is available. We need to discuss that. We need to think about it positively. We need breeding strategies that will protect farm animal welfare, not simply pursue production and business performance and go, oh, we just want more, more, more. Animal welfare must be the key sustainability objective, including consideration of good life, a humane death, and in those 5 domains. But we then, of course, as we've already discussed, have to balance that with ethical, economic, and environmental considerations. So the future, One Health, humans, animals, and the environment. We want to look at those things together, but we must have integrated governance of those concerns and an overarching global guidance system on all aspects of sustainable development. And for that, we need a lifetime objective assessment of animal welfare that is consistent across all these different areas and that we can manage and look at and drill down to those things that are causing a difference. And so there's the way the website and the background references are there on the website. And it would be great if anyone wants to follow up on this and take this forward. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sarah. Very nice talk. And we have many questions. I think we have time for at least one. Is the animal welfare assessment grid also applicable in assessing the work of government and NGO towards animal welfare? For example, can we use it to assess the effect and impact of certain legislation on animal welfare?
We can use it to look at the impact on animal welfare of things that we're doing. So if you, so for example, with the gene editing, you could look at it to see the impact of the gene editing on the welfare of the animals. And then you can look at that and say, do we want this legislation to say this can go ahead or do we not want it to go ahead? We can look at the impact of transportation. We can look at it to, for example, with the laboratory animals, looking at the impact of, with the COVID vaccines, for example, we were working with animals in different levels of biosafety, where obviously the way you keep them has to be very different. So we've just assessed all of that. And in fact, that paper's just been accepted. It will be published soon in laboratory animals.
Thank you, Sarah. There are a couple more questions in the chat, and I will ask you if you can maybe answer them there, so we can continue with our timeline.